All right, we were back for I think part 4 of the B7 build process. We're gonna be putting the car to a side. Up next on the manual is working on the differential and the diff case. So one of the biggest things to the two-wheel drive buggies, I call it the heart of the two-wheel drive, is the diff and the transmission. And we're gonna get this thing started for you. One of the things that I like using as an optional part from the kit is the greases. I put them in different tubes, the RM2 gold grease and RM2 clear grease. Kind of my go-to favorites when it comes to building a diff. I also do have a diff building video back in my YouTube channel for just an example and show you guys how I build it. And obviously in today's video we're going to be doing the same thing. So let's get right to it. One of the more important things about building a diff is kind of wiping off all the excess oil and grease from the out drives. You can use motor spray or just wipe it off. You can see like it's a little brown marking there. That way you get all the proper greases in there that they don't fade or don't mix directly together. So once you get everything wiped, wipe the rings. And you're kind of good to go there. We're gonna take the outdrive that has the kind of a nipple right here, which is the male end, and the female end is the other side. Gonna get your bearings. I put it on the slot on both sides just to get them in there and done. And then take my grease, a little bit of a nub there, and then just kind of rotate it all the way through the slot. Not too much, not too little. I don't even know if you can kind of see there. And then I put that to a side. Take the access that you have from the other diff, put it on the other end. And then maybe just a little tab more. So you can see. Booyah. Then I'll take the gear. Since with the syringe, I just get these from Amazon. It's nice to have the syringe because then you can kind of like point the grease in the spots of the holes of the diff. And I do a big rotation. The grease is in there. And then what I do is I put it on the gear on the male side with the nub. Slide that on there. And then I'll get the diff balls as I have it cut, and I'll twist it a little bit, make a little like ramp, and slide the balls into the gear. Then you can take your 2.0 driver and then slide each diff ball into each individual slots. Make sure they're seated in right. Now, before you do anything else, you always want to make sure that the bolt and the spring and the bolt go into the diff out drive that has the nub sticking out. So I don't do any crushing to the diff spring. I just set it in there, hold it. Now that that's done, I'm gonna put together the other end. So now you won't put the screw in the wrong side. I'm gonna get my thrust cage out, and with the diff, there's two sets of washers that are for the cage. There's one that has a bigger hole and one that has a smaller hole. Now, to be honest with you, I've built these diffs 1,000 times, and I don't really know exactly if there's a right or wrong way of doing this, but for my personal experience, I've always built the diff with the larger hole diameter, the inner hole diameter first. I don't think there's any science to my madness. Get your gold grease, or if you don't have gold grease, the black grease is fine. The gold grease is just kind of the more bougie of black greases, you can say. The cage, though, I will say, moving on to the next part, is an important piece of how you want to put the cage in. I always put the cage facing up. Basically the balls are exposed. So I slide that on there nice and slowly. Then kind of wipe the excess grease off. And then again, with the top exposed, having the syringe is nice because then you can kind of force the grease into the cage. Then put the last washer on. I don't put it on all the way. I actually put it on for it to all be seated together. So you want the two cages facing the grooves rings. So that's where the balls kind of sit on. And then I again grease the final washer and then slowly roll it on and then wipe off the excess. Now we can take the diff, put it on the other opposite side of the bolt, and screw it on. This is kind of a challenge for people. I know watching is tough to say how tight you really need to tighten the diff until you think it's good enough to put in your car. We forgot one of the most important things. See, even I make mistakes. The actual rings for the diff. Then you want to re-grease these on the outer side. That was actually a huge problem. It's actually more challenging than you think, making this video and building a diff all at the same time. Make sure those are greased. So now that I have the tightness that I'm looking for, I can kind of show you guys. You can kind of get the excess grease off with the 2.5 from the inside. Clean that off as good as you can. And what I like doing to tell if it's acceptable to put in your car is if you can hold the diff itself and rock the outdrive, it's too loose to put in your car to start. So mine's rocking just a little bit. I'm gonna tighten it a quarter turn and do another quarter turn there. And then you're good to go. Kind of rotate it both sides. And that diff is done. Moving on to the transmission. Put the diff to a side. I do not use the dust cover anymore. I think the dust cover sometimes actually, if you slide it on the diff with the screw, sometimes it can put pressure and kink the screw and make the diff feel not proper. We don't need the greases anymore until we get the gears in there. Perfect. So again, we're going to clean some of the flashing off. This is the top of the diff. And should be clear to go. Perfect. Getting all the screws and bags and everything opened. All right, now we can start putting bearings. Out of their gears. So start putting the bearings in the out of their gears. Now there's 2 additional out of their gears. 5-gear transmission. Top shaft. Gears are in. Perfect. Nice and smooth. Get your 3x16s. You can screw in 2 of them. Had a little bit of grease on my 2.0. And then the third 3x16 can go in there. Perfect. Now with the diff and your diff height adjustments, I am going to be running diff height adjustment 1. So the diff height adjustment 1 needs to be facing up towards the top of the car. Get the flashing off the sides, put your bearings on. Rule of thumb, I always put the diff screw towards the passenger side. Whoa. So 1 is facing up, slide that thing in there, and the gear mesh is super smooth. We're gonna add a little bit of gold grease just to the top. Going to put the ball stem mount on the rear. It slides over the nub. And then last but not least, we're gonna rotate it to get the grease down to the bottom. And voila, snap the piece on. Get your another 3x16. On both sides for the back. And then your 3x12s. Or 3x16s for the front as well, cap. Tighten all the 4 screws right there, and you're pretty much dialed in. We're going to get the titanium ball stud washers, or ball studs, for the inner ball stud height, which is, we're putting it at 3 millimeters. Little Loctite. And then we're running it in the middle hole position. And then I'm going to use the last screw for the top plate. Perfect. And then the super sweet motor mounts. It is directional kind of because you have the countersunk screws, so don't forget about that. And then we have the motor guard cover, or the gear cover. Can't forget that. Cool little piece. That's gonna slide in up top, like so. Oop. These are 3x12s. Make sure those are nice and tight. Good to go there. We're gonna screw on the rear shock tower while the diff is out. Diff case is out. Just easier just to screw it on, get a better fit. Perfect. Also too guys, as an upgrade, I'm going to be installing the optional slipper pads. The kit comes with the white ones, but I prefer our upgraded slipper pads. It's a little bit of a different material. The white slipper pads are good, but it seems like for long term, as you run, you don't have to maintenance them nearly as much with the optional upgraded pads. So that's why we run these, and they've been very successful. So as for modify, we're gonna be running 78 as the spur gear, but if you run stock, probably want to run the 72 option. Installing the slipper plate, kind of rotate for this for you guys. I always put the first plate on first. Then put the spur gear on, letting gravity help you out. And holding that down. I always like blowing on the pad just before I'm installing it, just to ensure that there's no like pebbles or dust or lint on the pad. And then same goes for the plate. Make sure it's super clean. Slide that on, make sure it's locked. And then there goes the top shaft screw. Pushing that on, holding that on. It's the double T-hat bushing goes on first, then the spring, then the last T-hat, and then the nut. And I am going to tighten this up till the nut is flush. And just like that, you got your diff and diff case built. Now let's install the screws for the tower. We're gonna be leaning these in, not all the way and one out from all the way in. Little Loctite on the screws. And then the last cool thing to the project, we'll install these two pieces. It's optional to run the shock tower guard, but I am going to install that a little bit later if I decide to do so. And then the 3 screws that hold on the wing mount. And voila, transmission is built. We're gonna get this screwed in, and then that'll be the end of this part of the video. We'll move on to the next one. All right, that was a little hiccup there. Installing the transmission. Now, gonna be using all the short screws. Perfect. Now we're going to be installing the arms. One spacer in front of the arm and one behind the arm. So in the middle. Demount middle row 1 down. Make sure that the top piece is lining up with the diff case. And the 2 super long screws, do a little Loctite because those are screwing into aluminum. Nice and tight, and make sure your arms are free, and if they're not, you can always tap them with the tool, and just like that, part 4 is done.